What's up, YouTube? Welcome to ExceedTheHype.com. It's your boy Lucrecio coming at you with another video. All right, shout out to Jesus is my King 777. Yeah, I saw that. The problem with that issue, the Otto Porter situation, is that I don't think they have a good chance of getting them. I think the Wizards were waiting for somebody to offer them so they can match it. However, I think Otto Porter would fit great with the Sacramento Kings if somehow the Wizards messed up, let him go, or if the Wizards decided to pursue somebody else. The Wizards' name are in the Carmelo Anthony sweepstakes right now, so I could totally see that happening. Yeah, 24 years old, he would fit with that young team. Tell me this: what do you think about Vince Carter? I heard a whole lot about Vince Carter meeting with Sacramento later today to discuss a possible deal. So that should be pretty interesting as well. So we'll see. Yeah, exactly. It was signing as a mentor, basically. And also, it's not purely a mentorship, though, because Vince Carter actually can still play, even though he's like old, really, really old. So, today's video, and I'm just trying to do a live little video real quick. Yeah, still has game. Real quick about the Minnesota Timberwolves and their off season this year. So let's talk about Minnesota for a second. They have Tom Thibodeau as their coach, and what is Tom Thibodeau known for is basically defense. So Tom Thibodeau was a side assistant coach with the championship Boston Celtics. All right. When he left Boston, and I don't want to talk about Doc Rivers. I like Doc Rivers. I think Doc Rivers is a great coach. But I think a lot of the credit that went to Doc Rivers and Kevin Garnett for that team being an outstanding defensive team, a big portion of that should have been going to Tom Thibodeau. I feel like Tom Thibodeau is a genius defensive coach in the NBA. All right. So with that, understanding that, what has Tom Thibodeau done in his career? Well, in 2011, when the Miami Heat formed that super team in Miami with LeBron, D. Wade, and Chris Bosh, along with a bunch of veteran minimum players or whatever, they didn't finish first in the Eastern Conference. Why didn't they finish first? Because a young man, Derrick Rose, and the Chicago Bulls ended up winning I think 61 games and took first place that year. Why? It was defense. Tom Thibodeau is, in my opinion, probably one of the best defensive coaches we have in the NBA right now. And last season, I was a little bit disappointed with how Minnesota plays defense. But, and it's a big but, it looks like last year was just a transition year. Last year was just to kind of see what the young guys in Minnesota, what they're made of. This year, it looks like Tom Thibodeau is shooting his shot in the NBA as a head coach. Let's talk about the moves that Minnesota did. So, the first move was him getting his pupil, his guy, Jimmy Butler, from the Bulls earlier this offseason, which was a big deal. A lot of people feel like Minnesota got the best of that trade. Definitely outstanding work by the front office in Minnesota, getting somebody who's already a star to go with those guys. And the next thing he was able to do was sign Jeff Teague. Now, and I agree, he absolutely, Jimmy Butler already knows how Thibodeau gets down. He already knows what he's going to demand from the young guy. He already knows the system that Thibodeau is going to try to teach these guys. I think Jimmy Butler is going to be an extension of Tom Thibodeau on the court. And because of that, it's going to help them be a lot more successful. And I think Wiggins will benefit greatly from both of them. Remember, let's talk about Andrew Wiggins for a second. Remember Andrew Wiggins in college, the thing they said, because they weren't sure about his motor, they weren't sure about his shooting ability as far as consistency, they weren't sure about whether he can handle the ball, they weren't sure exactly what he was going to be able to do in the NBA, really. But what ended up happening? In the NBA so far, to me, he's a really good scorer. He could score the basketball. I think his handle, his outside shot is a little bit more consistent than we thought it would be. But defensively, whereas that was his strength in college, and they thought from day one he'd be a lockdown defender in the NBA. He hasn't really been that in the NBA up to this point. I think Thibodeau will, because he has the tools. I think Thibodeau will help him become that. Thibodeau and Jimmy Butler. So anyway, they got Jimmy Butler. They were able to get Jeff Teague. Now, the Jeff Teague signing, out of all the signings, was a little odd because I just felt like there were better point guards out there. I feel like Kyle Lowry was in the picture for a while, and if Kyle Lowry's in the picture, you got to close, especially if you're a defensive coach. You got to close the deal on Kyle Lowry. Well, he ended up going back to the Raptors, so you didn't get Kyle Lowry. But even though you didn't get Kyle Lowry, you chose Jeff Teague even before you got Kyle Lowry. Now, I liked Jeff Teague a couple years ago with Atlanta. I didn't like him last year with Indiana. I thought his game took a full step back. So we'll see if Thibodeau sees something that I'm not seeing in Jeff Teague and really trust him to be that point guard for that team. The next move I want to talk about real quick is one that's pretty much underrated. I haven't seen a whole lot of people talking about this, and it's Taj Gibson. So once again, Taj Gibson is another one of those Tibbs guys. He coached them in Chicago. But Taj Gibson, I think, is one of the best non-star NBA players out there. Like, Taj Gibson is outstanding. So, I've been watching Taj Gibson since USC, and I said this in one of my videos the other day. I've been watching him since USC. He probably, even though OJ Mayo was on the team with him, he popped off the screen more than anybody else. So, with the Bulls, he was a great defender. He was a very versatile defender. He could guard multiple positions. He guarded center to a small forward. He has a very dependable 18-footer. He's not going to step out to the three-point line and hit you any threes, but he's a good pick-and-pop player from that range, from that like 18-foot range or whatever the case may be. He's a good rebounder. And once again, he's a good defender. So I feel like he's like a player that would fit really, really good next in a Tom Thibodeau. Well, he played in the Tom Thibodeau system, but I feel like he fit good on this team as a leader, as a veteran leader, and just as a player in this team. So I feel like Minnesota made some very, very aggressive moves, and they're not even finished. They're really not even finished. They still have more money to spend and more willing and dealing. And let's talk about the next one. This one has not been in the books yet. They haven't been able to close this deal yet. But they're meeting with Paul Millsap. Now, Paul Millsap isn't one of the huge names out there when it comes to players that have been talked about a lot in the media or whatever. But Paul Millsap is a heck of a player. Like, if you talk about somebody who can get you 10 rebounds and 20 points, Paul Millsap is that guy. And his game fits with this NBA. Like, this NBA requires the bigs to have a certain amount of range because you need to create more space on the floor and give like the slashers more room to attack the basket and less availability for help defenders to get over in time to help stop the slasher or whatever. So Paul Millsap is that guy, but he can't. It's not just about shooting outside shots. He can get you shots inside. He can play real physical. He can get you rebounds, and he's a pretty good defender as well. Paul Millsap added to this team with Karl Anthony Towns as the defensive anchor, which he will end up being one way or the other, and another scorer with Andrew Wiggins, and another scorer with Jimmy Butler, and another scoring a point guard who's capable of scoring. It's absolutely scary. Yeah, absolutely. So Millsap in the playoffs, there was a lot of back and forth going between him and the twin, what was the Markieff Morris or Marcus Morris, whichever one it was. And I thought that was so crazy because as much as Morris was talking, Millsap was just giving it to him in the game. It was like no match. There was no real match in the game. And it should have been because they're both equally sized players. They both have similar physical attributes. They both got the same about. Morris is pretty fast. Morris is pretty athletic or whatever. It should have been a good matchup, but it really wasn't because Paul Millsap knows how to play the game. So when you add that to a team, and keep in mind, a lot of the experts, the NBA experts, expected the Minnesota Timberwolves to be a playoff team last year. So they underperformed last year, even though they're a young team. They underperformed last year. Yeah, absolutely, inside and outside. Um, so they underperformed last year. So this year, you take that team that many experts thought were going to make the playoffs, probably as a lower seed last year. You take that team and then you add all these, good veteran players, these solid veteran players. Paul Millsap, multiple time All Star. Jeff Teague had an All Star appearance before. Taj Gibson is probably one of the best players in the NBA who has not been an All Star. And you got a pretty good, you have a really, really scary nucleus here with the Minnesota Timberwolves. I still think they could do more because they got rid of Ricky Rubio. They could bring in another backup point guard. And once again, they have a defensive genius as the coach of that team. So I really feel like there are big things in store for Minnesota. I think they're out for blood in the Western Conference. I think they have a chance. It's going to be harder now. Let's look at the Western Conference. You have a Golden State Warriors team who's still going to be number one next year, even though I think somebody's going to do something to knock them off, but they're going to win at least 67 games like they always do. You have San Antonio, who you have to expect will always be in that mix. As long as there's a Western Conference, there's going to be a Spurs in the top as one of the top seeds. You have to also move Oklahoma City into that conversation as one of the top Western Conference teams with the addition of Paul George. You just have to add them into that conversation as well. Then you have the Rockets. We'll see. I like the Chris Paul addition. I expected the Chris Paul to come with somebody else. I was hoping not Paul George. I was hoping Paul George would go to the Cavaliers, but it didn't happen. And the Rockets didn't get Paul George either. Carmelo Anthony is understood to be a player. This Paul Millsap was supposed to be a player for the Rockets, but we'll see. If I'm Paul Millsap, I don't know. If you're Paul Millsap, anybody out there, if you're Paul Millsap, and on one hand you have the Houston Rockets with probably one of the best point guards ever. You have James Harden, another outstanding scorer on that team. You have D'Antoni running the free-flowing offense on that side. On the other side, you have a Minnesota team with a bunch of young studs. You have Cat, who's basically very similar to Anthony Davis type player, and he's more durable. You have Jimmy Butler, perennial all-star, defensive, very stout defensive player, can give you 22, 23 points per game, unselfish, very much a team guy. You have a point guard who you've played with before in Jeff Teague. And then you have Andrew Wiggins, who's kind of just the freaking wild card. You don't know what he's gonna do, how he's gonna continue to grow as a player. If it's me, I'd probably choose Minnesota. So we'll see how the Rockets, what else the Rockets can pull off or whatever. But Minnesota is going to be right in that conversation with some of those top Western Conference teams. All right, you guys watching, let me know what you think about that. Let's see. Yeah, Minnesota absolutely has a whole lot of weapons. Let's see, it would be interesting. Harden used to be so ball dominant. All right, so with the James Harden thing, I do believe he is very ball dominant, but I think he's very. My thing with James Harden, I think he'd concede that role as that main playmaker to Chris Paul pretty easily. I don't think that they'll have much animosity, well, not animosity, but much between them when it comes to who's gonna have the ball in their hands most of the time. If you're an NBA player, I think they universally understand that Chris Paul is the best playmaker in the NBA still. So I don't see James Harden trying to fight him on that at all. I think they'll coexist just fine. My question is whether or not it's enough to make that happen. So I also agree with that as well. I think Russell, his all-around numbers will be down. I could totally see Russell still averaging the high 20s or possibly low 30s again, even with Paul George on the team. I think that team's just going to be locked and loaded. I don't see him averaging 10 rebounds again. And I'd like to see him keep the assist numbers up, though. I really would like to see Russell Westbrook keep the assist numbers. I like the idea that he's a 25 plus scorer and an 8 plus assist guy. I think that's a very, very tough player, and I think that's what he's going to average out to. Yeah, the Western Conference is deep, and the Eastern Conference is becoming more and more and more shallow every day, it seems. Kyle Lowry stayed, so that helps a little bit. Paul George being out of there is tough. Um, let's see. Yeah, I'm sure Boston will get Gordon Hayward, but I mean they're still not going to be able to overcome Cleveland even with them. And I think Cleveland is might end up with Carmelo Anthony if they could get. Yeah, this is my thought process on LeBron James. As much as I like LeBron James as a player and as a figure in the NBA as a guy, uh, I really think he should go to the Western Conference next year. Not next year, but once his contract is up, which I never understood why he signed a 3-year contract with Cleveland anyway. I really think he should go ahead and move on down to the Western Conference. It could be the Lakers, it could be San Antonio, it could be whatever team. I don't care which team he goes to. I just think he should go. Because imagine you're in the gym playing a tournament against a bunch of people who not really on your level, and then there's a gym next door that you know the best the best basketball players in the world are playing in. Are you really satisfied playing in the gym you're playing with when you know you're better than just about everybody in the other gym as well? No, you want to play. You don't want to play against the easy competition. You want to play against the harder competition. So, and I made a video about that yesterday. I just think he's gonna leave. I think he's getting boring in the Eastern. Yeah, yeah, and this year is gonna be worse unless something crazy happens in the East this year. I think there's an outside chance that the Heat may become good quickly. Uh, I thought they had a pretty good chance at Blake Griffin. It didn't work out that way, but I thought they would have a pretty good chance with Blake Griffin. I think it's not impossible Gordon Hayward goes there. It depends on. I mean, if you would you rather play on the beach or would you rather play in Boston? I mean, that's what it goes. I don't think the Wizards match up with Cleveland. I think had they played in the Eastern Conference Finals this year, I don't think that Cleveland would have had much more trouble with them than they had with Boston. I think it would have been about the same situation with those two guys. Um, so I mean, and we'll see. But I just don't see the Eastern Conference getting strong anytime soon. And for it to be interesting for LeBron in the East, I think they need about 3 strong teams for him to face or whatever. If they can't get that, then I think he should go to the Western Conference. It could be the Lakers, it could be anybody, but I absolutely think he should go to the Western Conference. Another thing is, people talking about all these finals appearances and this and that. Let's see, I think it should be traded. I've never been into the playoff bracket thing. I can see why a lot of people say that. Just put it 1 through 16 or whatever and fight it out. I could see that. To me, I don't mind either way. I mean, if people are complaining about a conference being weaker than other, then I could totally see them doing that. It wouldn't bother me. It wouldn't bother me one way or the other. Yeah, the East is weak. Yeah, I feel like they need another strong team, and everybody's going west. I thought Kyle Lowry was going to go west. Paul George is in the west, which was a surprise to me. Of all the teams, I did not. Even though I always thought that would be awesome if Paul George, if Russell Westbrook can get some help. I always thought that would be great. But yeah, now that he has it, we'll see. They need more though. OKC does absolutely still need more to really be able to say they're going to go stare down Golden State. But I love the fact because last season, there was multiple games. Every time Golden State played OKC, it was just really, really bad. Like, you could see Russell Westbrook playing his heart out